On the topic of what could have been in 2018 in this era and with the Washington Capitals, I came across this story on Reddit that I would like to read before we end the podcast here. Ted Leonsis on the Forsberg for Erat trade and Nick Backstrom's trade request in 2017. All content is from Craig Custenson's new book, The Franchise. Leonsis on Forsberg for Erat. This group won a lot of games. It played entertaining brand of hockey, but under McPhee, they never broke through in the playoffs. On April 3rd, 2013, the Capitals traded prospect Philip Forsberg to the Nashville Predators for Marty Erat. The Capitals had the foresight to pick Forsberg 11th overall in 2012 in a draft that also landed them Tom Wilson, Chandler Stevenson, Connor Carrick, and Christian Juice. But after getting a closer look at Forsberg following that draft, organizational doubts crept in. Coaches didn't love his game at the summer prospect camp. Viewings of him playing and swinging led to reports back to McPhee that included concerns about the lack of start and stop in his game. There wasn't enough compete. The criticism was premature. Forsberg blossomed into a star after the trade. That's why both George and coach Adam Oates lost their jobs, Leonsis said. Literally what happened there was the last minute. There's this huge trade, Marty Erat for Philip Forsberg, and we thought, Adam said, we're going to the playoffs. We need a money guy, experienced guy. And what we heard afterwards was George makes the trade. Erat shows up, and Adam says, I don't want this guy. Later on in the chapter, Leonsis reveals that Backstrom asked the Caps to consider trading him. But it was the ballroom celebration at the team hotel that led to an exchange Leonsis won't forget. He walked in and the players were already celebrating hard as they would for weeks. He spotted Nick Backstrom with the cup, having a great time. Backstrom looked over at Leonsis, spotted him and his wife Lynn, and ran over with the cup. He handed it to Leonsis, and he starts crying, Leonsis said. And he goes, thank you, I love you, thank you, I'm an idiot. Leonsis laughed, retelling what Backstrom said to him. I can't believe I said, I don't think we're going to win a Stanley Cup. Thank you for not listening to me, Leonsis said, and sharing Backstrom's response at the celebration. It was a very endearing moment. Thank you for not listening to me. A moment for the ages was created by Leonsis's refusal to give in to Backstrom's trade request following that crushing loss to the Penguins in the 2017 playoffs. After the elimination game, a large group of players had dinner together at the steakhouse at the MGM National Harbor in Maryland. Team Sweden management was pushing hard to get Backstrom out of the U.S. to Cologne, Germany, to join the world team in the World Championships. Team Sweden was all over him, and he said, I'm going to dinner with these guys. If you want me, you can wait another day, Orpik said. Knowing Nicky, that's not surprising. There was a lot of discouragement at that dinner, a lot of frustration. Everyone felt like it was a blown opportunity with maybe the best roster ever assembled in Washington. The pressure from the outside was mounting, as was the criticism. The exit interviews were emotional and lengthy. It was under these circumstances that Backstrom openly questioned whether he and Ovechkin could win together in Washington. He came to us after the season and said, it's not working, Leonsis said. It's obvious something is wrong in this mix, and so I think it's a good time for you to consider what Alex and I make a good team, and will we ever be able to win a Stanley Cup? I'm at the point in my career where if I don't win a Stanley Cup, I'll be unfulfilled. Can it happen here?
Wow.
For the first time, I'm really questioning that so much that I want you to consider, should I be traded? That's
Dude.
that.
And you know what's crazy about this whole situation? Because like now, like the memories are starting to flow back from summer 2017. There were legit rumors that Ovechkin was going to get traded.
I remember the Dangle podcast that's like looking at trade offers, like Ovechkin hypothetical trades.
Yeah, and one of them was to the Blackhawks for Brent Seabrook. So, God, I wish Steve Dangle was the GM of the Capitals, but oh well.
I gotta go back and listen to that. That's so funny that's one of the trades.
But there's two ways to look at this. One, it's incredible what the Caps did in 2018 because I think any Capitals fan can tell you. I know because one of my close friends is one. Vibes were at an all-time low in 2017. They got punched in the fucking mouth, and they had a chance to win that series, and they got punched in the mouth in Game 7.
I remember they were down 3-1, and then they were just
they came all the way back.
Really shut down, in Game 7 by the hands of Marc-Andre Fleury.
That was
Again.
a series where Ovechkin wasn't getting it done. That was a series where they were not getting the depth scoring again, which has been just a glaring red flag. And you're gonna love where I'm about to take this, because how does this affect the Leafs? And that's immediately where my brain went when I'm listening to this, because there's two sides of every coin. You know what I mean? There's a side where you stick with your guns year after year, and eventually you break through.
They're probably the number one example of that. The Caps.
I can look time and time again. The Lightning are another great example of that.
They lost to the Capitals in 2018. They were shut out in game 6 and 7 of the conference final. Yeah.
It's a prime example. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to how the guys in the room respond. And if you look at the way these Capitals players were talking, they were either going to win the cup that year or they were going to blow the fucking team up. And that is clear as day, as the coach who won the cup did not return to the team the next season. This is a team that had the backs against the wall and found a way to get it done. And there's two ways that situation always goes. You either break through that glass ceiling or you end up in a position like a San Jose Sharks. You know what's great? It's not just the Leafs that are in this situation of trying to break through that glass ceiling.
We talked about the Jets. I would add the Hurricanes in there, who are
Dallas, dude.
Dallas might actually be the best example, because again, I've said so many times, they've done everything but win a cup. They've lost. They've ran into Vegas. They ran into St. Louis when they won the cup. I think they ran into another team that won the cup. But you got to break through one of those years too.
Yes, you 100% have to break through. And if you can't do it, I think it speaks more to the people in the room than it does anyone else. And clearly, Ted Leonis saw something there, because there are a lot of GMs that would just make that trade, straight up, and just say, I understand. We will put you in the best situation for you to achieve that. And they said, no, this is the crew that's going to get it done. And they got it done. There are at least 5 teams in the league right now that need to take a hard look in the mirror if this season isn't the season for them, which sucks, because that means only one team can get it done. But I'll tell you right now, teams like Carolina, where Marty Necas has 24 points in 14 games. I want to make that very clear. Been meaning to say that the whole show. They got their superstar player, and it's a guy that they bridged. So nice job, guys.
Who they were apparently going to trade, and they kept him.
And he's going crazy.
Yeah.
So Buffalo, I don't know what the hell you were holding back on, but you probably should have done it, because him and Tage could have just torched the league. It's a situation where it's not up or shut up time, and I think that's the case for the Caps, and it worked in 2018, and that's the case for teams like Dallas, teams like Toronto, teams like Carolina. It's shit or get off the pot time, and if they can't get it done this season, it might not get done. Genuinely think that, especially with teams like Carolina and Toronto. I think this is the last straw.
I'll add Edmonton to that list too.
Edmonton, I won't even add to that list, because they just extended Draisaitl. You have your chance. Yeah. Obviously, they've gotten closer than any. They were a goal away. So, that's why I'm not going to add them to this.
Yeah. For me, they got to win with Bouchard, though, because I don't know what that. Well, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. So it just comes down to your players either really want it or they're complacent. And I think there's a lot of teams in the league where you can look at, how the team's been constructed and how they've performed. And I think there's a lot of complacency going on in the NHL right now. Not saying that's the Hurricanes, but I'll tell you one thing. Dallas, most organizations that get to where Dallas has gotten to usually make a big move to get over the hump. Most teams like Toronto, they change the formula and they're sticking to it, because if I'm being honest, there have been 3 cases that it has worked in the last decade. So the evidence is the proof's in the pudding. Colorado, they stuck with their guns. Granted, they adapted and added Kadri and stuff, but they got over the hump. Tampa stuck with their guns, made depth changes that got them over the hump. It's all depth scoring. This whole tangent I'm on goes back to depth scoring, because that's the only reason the Caps won that fucking cup in 2018. Besides the fact that Ovechkin actually played how he's supposed to play in the playoffs. A lot of things that could go right for you to win a Stanley Cup. Crazy, right?
And you could argue that he wasn't even the best player on that. You could argue because Kuznetsov was better.
He was
that playoff run, yeah.
But this is the point. Like, you have to have multiple facets of scoring in the playoffs to win. And I think every Hawks Cup run, we can look back and say there's at least 3 bottom sixers that put them over the hump every year. Tampa, the third line was the reason they won those 2 cups. Washington, Devontae Smith-Pelly had 7 goals in the playoffs.
Like, Brett Connolly, former Blackhawks legend, had some goals. Lars Eller, who again they just got back, had the cup-winning goal.
Who's gonna be the Leafs' Brett Connolly? Who's going to be Dallas's Devontae Smith-Pelly? Who's going to be Carolina's Evgeny Kuznetsov? Looks like it's Marty Necas right now. Mm-hmm. But it's about these guys taking that next step. Potential. Yes. It's about these guys taking their next step. And it's going to be funny because, if anything, the team that's showing me that they're going to do that is probably Dallas or Toronto, just because they're doing the same stuff they always do, but they're learning how to win a different way, which is something that Washington was doing in 2018, which I think replicated in the playoffs. And I think any player on the Washington team would tell you if they lose Game 3 in Columbus, they don't win the cup. Plain and simple. Yeah. Plain and simple. It's a game of inches. It's a game of one bounce. It's a game of just one game can change your whole mentality. And clearly, looking back on it, Game 7 2017 did that for the Caps. So it'll be interesting to see who's the next team that can do that. Because for Colorado, it was definitely losing in Game 7 at Dallas. I'll tell you that much. For Tampa, it was not scoring a goal in the last 3 games against the Caps in 2018. And then getting swept by the Blue Jackets. and that's another perfect example. If Tampa doesn't beat Columbus Game 1 in that 5 overtime game, I guarantee you they don't repeat.
I don't think they win the cup. They probably win that series, but I don't think they win the cup.
They don't win the cup. And I'll keep it another buck. If the Caps don't beat the Penguins or get that monkey off their back, who's to say they do? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the year to do it for Toronto was last year. That's all I'm going to say. Probably would have lost to Florida anyway, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Dallas will have more chances. They built their team well, but
yeah, Dallas is just the example. Like, they can win a cup now, and then they're set up to win a cup for like at least the next 5 years, half decade. We were so lucky with the Blackhawks because they'd really just caught lightning in a bottle between 2010 and 2015, winning 3 cups. And like, really the only moment of doubt there was like, oh, if they don't get past Detroit, like Quenneville and Bowman might have both lost their jobs. And I can only think like them being down 3-1, like obviously Seabrook going over to Taves in the box. And it's like, we know what the results are with a lot of these teams, but you almost think like, what's more curious to me is like what happens behind the scenes. Like, what are the players thinking? Like, what's happening with like the general manager and coach? Like, really thinking like, oh, am I going to lose my job? And I feel like reading that story is like, we didn't know that, Washington or like Nick Backstrom wanted a trade request. We probably find out if the Capitals like lose again in the second round of the Penguins that year, but they won. So you don't hear that story. And I think it's always curious to hear the other end of it. Yeah, like the Blackhawks caught lightning in a bottle, won 2010 and 2015. The Penguins, even like they won their cup quickly with their core of Malkin and Crosby, but they shuffled things around. They added Phil Kessel. They've added a bunch of other guys. I mean, their HBK line won them the cup in 2016. Like, they went 7 years without a cup, and they had some like brutal exits, like losing to the Flyers the way that they did, and then just getting curb stomped by the Bruins in the conference final. Closest I think we've ever gone to a Penguins Blackhawks Cup final. And then they blew a 3-1 series lead to the Rangers. I think they blew a 3-1 series lead to the Lightning in 2011. Like, they had some brutal exits, and they just kept with their main core, like shuffled some pieces around, and then they go back to back. And like Tampa Bay first go to the Cup final, they lose to the Blackhawks. I think like lost to the Penguins in the conference finals. Then you miss the playoffs, come back, losing the conference finals. Just an all-time embarrassing sweep to the Blue Jackets, but you come back and win 2 cups in less than a calendar year. So yeah, it's always interesting to look at the cup winning teams and see all the adversity to go through. Like, it's hard to win it every year, but when you get so many kicks at the can and like you're almost 10 years into it, you don't even have like a cup final or even conference final to account for it, especially in the case of the Leafs. That's what's tough.
That's the tricky question. And this is why I bring it up with these three teams specifically, like you said, because are you going to be the Capitals or are you going to be the Sharks? And that's the cold reality of the NHL.
Yeah, the Sharks are probably like the number one example of the Cap era, best team, but never won, unfortunately, which sucks because they had some really good teams. They made it to the Cup final, they made it to a conference final a couple times, but didn't get it done. Like simple but harsh, like
Facts.